Hello, Mum.
Hi, how are you? I don't know why I'm asking you that. I've been here an hour.
I know. This is an unusual situation for us to find ourselves in, but I thought for Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day, by the way, we would do a Mother's Day episode of Happy Place and have a chat, which I know you were apprehensive about in terms of you didn't want to sound... What did you describe yourself as a plank? I think
As
you
a
said.
wally. I don't want to look like a wally.
But as I've said, we're not expecting you to be an expert. Like, you're not turning up like Brené Brown. We're just having a chat. We're literally just having a chat.
All right, I'm in your capable hands.
Very much so, hopefully. But also it's weird for me because normally I'm in a very sort of work mode. So I'm torn between trying to be professional in work mode, but also being a daughter, which is a bit like childlike at times. Do you know what I mean? So I'm in the middle of that. It's quite confusing for me.
How do you think I feel?
More confused, probably. So work out which role you are. Bit mum, a bit podcast guest, and we're good to go.
Well, the pleasure's all yours anyway.
Well, quite, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things that I want to talk to you about today. We're not going to do like a twee Mother's Day thing because I know that's not your style and you don't like stuff like that. I'll give you your present on Sunday when you come for lunch and all that jazz.
That'd be a good one.
It's a great gift, but I want to talk about lots of different things. And I guess the first, most obvious one is mental health, because it's an awkward thing, I think, for people to talk about within families. And obviously I've talked to like hundreds of strangers about it, but it's always weirdly more difficult when it's people you're related to. And I think one of the reasons is, say, like you and Dad come for tea with the dog or come for lunch or whatever. It's not like you go, oh, do you want a cup of tea? Oh, by the way, how's your mental health? Or let's talk about mental health. It feels like there's never the right time to sort of do it, I guess. But when I wrote Happy, my first book on mental health, I was still nervous to ask you, but I emailed you and said, would you write a piece about depression? Because I thought that would be easier than having a conversation. And it was. And you wrote a big piece that ended up in the book. So that was the first time that I guess I'd used the word depression in front of you and you'd done the same back to me. So let's dive into that a little bit. So talk to me about your experience of depression, when you think it started, how it manifests.
When did I first feel it?
I guess so, or like notice it being a thing.
I was going to say 18, but I think it went before that. When I say that, it was, I must have been about 8 or 9. And I remember when we lived in London, and it was very random. I remember walking to the shops to get Mum whatever, the little local shop. And I was walking over the brow of a railway bridge. And I remember people walking towards me. And this really powerful thought was in my mind that they all know something about me. They're not looking at me, but as they're walking by, I can feel them. They knew me.
Or like a paranoia state.
Yeah, I felt exposed, and that was as a young kid, and that was a one-off thing. Then skip forward to about 18, 19, and it kind of kicked in there. I'd be on the tube, and I'd be going to Oxford Street, and I'd feel I'm going to faint, and all this. Never have fainted from any of my mental problems, emotional problems. Never fainted, but always got to the brink of it. But I don't know anybody who ever has fainted from it. I think you will, but you don't.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to keep jumping around here now. I think having read your friend Rebecca's breathing book.
Rebecca Dennis, yeah.
Rebecca, yeah. It's breathing, I think, is the most helpful thing to do. And I didn't know about it then. So you'd hyperventilate and it would get worse, and so on and so forth.
So I guess that's a panic attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be panic attack. And then I'd get them in bed at night, which were the worst, because you do feel when you're in bed at night, it's just you and there's no one to help, and everything that's going through your mind gets bigger and bigger. And I've even had an ambulance come out to me.
When was that?
When? 20 years ago.
Wow.
maybe 15, 20 years ago, yeah.
And so in that, because, you know, obviously we've talked about this a little bit. I have exactly the same thing at night time, especially if I have a scary thing the next day where I feel I'm going to be judged or people are going to make commentary on me. It's not like I just can't go to sleep, because often people go, oh, have you tried this lavender spray? And you're like, oh my God, I could drink lavender spray and it's not going to do anything. This is like a physical, on a cellular level, panic. And you do feel very alone and very awful. But what are your symptoms, like physically? Is it still the feeling you're going to faint, or is it something else going on, your heart racing?
It's a feeling that washes over you. It's very hard to articulate. Obviously, the heart's banging away.
Yeah.
You're sweating hot and cold. You feel nauseous. You feel... I remember my mum used to get this, and she said it's like you're being dragged somewhere emotionally. You're out of control. But as I said, I have been applying... I don't get them anymore.
At all,
Touch
ever?
wood. No, actually, I don't. I don't get them very often at all now. And the breathing, 100% calms it.
Yeah.
It really does. Maybe 1 or 2 times in bed, maybe after I've had a drink. I don't drink loads, you know that.
Yeah.
Go to bed and you feel it creeping over
Yeah.
you. I do the various breathing techniques and it calms it right down.
Before you discovered all that, though, when you're lying there, is there one particular thought that you feel is propelling it, or do you think it's a physical thing that happens first? I would say mine oscillates between the two. Sometimes it's a panic that I'm not going to sleep. It's that simple. I'm not going to sleep, and tomorrow is going to be a write-off, and I've got this thing that I want to do well, or that thing I want to do well. And it's just an anxiety that sleep won't happen, and then it turns into panic. Or it could be specifically about a job. Or sometimes it feels like the physical bit gets there first. Do you have one particular thought that starts it all going, like a worry or a concern about something?
I think obviously your subconscious is carrying stuff all the time. So even if you don't bring it forward to your conscious, it's there and it's working and doing its thing. I mean, mine could be, like the other day, I twisted my foot on one of our long walks.
In your platform trainers?
Yes. And... and
This is don't wear platform trainers when you go for a walk.
Well, that is what did it, but I do, and I will continue to. Even if I was on crutches, I'd be, you know. Anyway, I kind of twisted my foot, and you know, it hurt at the time, and then it faded, and then I'm lying in bed, and the pain in the foot was like off the scale, and it was shocking, the pain, and that triggered a feeling of panic. So I thought of Rebecca's tips in the book, and I managed to quell it, along with a few prayers and what have you.
Yeah.
But the pain was really bad, actually. It's amazing. And then it just all faded away. But I can't answer that, because I could maybe 20 years ago have woken up and suddenly, bang, the eyes are wide open and all these feelings are coming in.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, it's just different every time, isn't it? And it's dependent on what you've eaten, if you slept well. But as you said, you're also carrying all of this stuff around subconsciously. That's a collection of stuff from your life, but also from your childhood. And you've already touched on Nan, who I called, well, every kid in our family called Nan TC, because she had a cat called TC, but otherwise known as Sylvia. And she had you at a really young age, and she had certain traumas in her life. I'm sure being evacuated in the war to a particularly abusive lady didn't help her own sort of development.
Her sibling died.
Her sister died at a young age.
7 years old. That can't have helped, you know.
And again, I didn't ever talk to Nan about this. Nan died quite early on, sadly, of cancer. But I didn't really get the chance to have this chat. And I hadn't started diving into this subject matter at that time. But I would love to have sat her down and quizzed her about it all a bit more, because we can see now in lineage, whether it's hereditary or whether it's learned behaviour from your parents or whatever, but also my cousin Bieber, who's got, you know, similar stuff going on to us. It's interesting to sort of look at nature versus nurture, what was already there versus what was learned. But your mum's mental health obviously wasn't great over the years. And I don't know, again, you don't have to answer this question because it's very private, but I've heard the phrase knocked around a bit, nervous breakdown with Nan. Is that accurate? She would have breakdowns?
Yeah, it was very, very difficult being a kid around that because, I don't know, I was 12, 13, Karen was a couple of years younger. I don't know, I've never really spoken in depth to Karen about it. You know, she doesn't, as far as I know, have any nervous problems, so she dealt with it in her own way. I dealt with it in my way, which was very, very, very hard. You know, you come home from school and you see your mum rocking in a chair staring at the wall, you know. She was very, I think she might have gone to a psychiatric ward in Ealing. I think it was called St Bernard's. I can't really remember much about it. I think she used to go there on and off for daycare or something. But it was really hard, really, really hard, because you didn't, as a kid, you didn't have anything to hang on to. You know, your mum was kind of really not there. And I remember we went to Austria for a holiday, and I think this is when I began to think something's not right. We were leaving the hotel. We were walking down a bit of a slope, and she fell over and she hurt her knee. And when she got up, we all got in the car, and she started sobbing, and she wouldn't stop for ages. And I just thought, this is not right. You know, it doesn't warrant that. And that would just be another thing that's just come into my head. Don't ask me why.
But all of these experiences and an overriding feeling of not having consistent maternal parenting affected you a lot and has manifested itself a lot over the years in lots of different ways.
Yeah. I mean, Dad was obviously looking after her, but who was sort of looking after us? Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah, so when you're in the midst of something now, or whether it's been 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when it'd been in a very low place or depressed or had bad anxiety, in those moments, do you ever look and think, I know where this is coming from. I know that this is what I've been exposed to, or that I wasn't nurtured, or are you too in the thick of it to connect the dots?
It doesn't really go back that far. I think it goes back to things that have happened over the last, not particularly with my parents, but with other people. And injustice in life generally, which I won't go into. But
you find that very hard to cope with?
Very hard. And not having a voice.
But I think, you know, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? These feelings or stuff that we need to still do work on, and we all do. I'm not talking about you. We've all got stuff that and everybody does until the day they die. There's always work to be done. There's always things to unpick and situations that we need to look at with more attention. When we've got stuff like that simmering, it usually manifests physically. And it could be something as just simple as a cough, but there's something.
Well, I actually had a thyroidectomy. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, that could have been through not
Saying your
my
bit.
thing, and it all got kind of caught there. Yeah, I don't generally, in the thick of it, go back to my childhood, to be fair. I think a 50s kid, we used to get smacked and what have you, you know, there was no.
Yeah, that's just how it was back then.
That's just how it was. And so you don't hold any grudge about that at all. It's just how it was. And it hasn't scarred you for life or anything.
But maybe the emotional side of it has had a longer lasting scar.
Yeah, I think you're right. Randomly, if anybody wanted a good book to read, it was a book that I found, I think it might have been in the 80s, called Peace from Nervous Suffering by a lady called Claire Weeks.
Okay.
And it is an old school book, but it was incredibly helpful at the time for people with agoraphobia and things like that. Easy to read, but it was a little gem actually. So you can get it. I know you can get it.
I'll read that for sure.
It was try it.
And still now, even if you're not having panic attacks, which is amazing, like that's so good, you do still have a tendency to catastrophize.
Oh, I do.
Hugely.
I 100% do. And I own that. I do own that. And that is me.
I do it as well.
It's me, you know.
Yeah.
I've got rules now. I say rules. I've got guidelines in which make my life a lot easier. And as you know, we've moved to a beautiful part of the country. So we get out a lot.
Yeah, walking is a big one
with
for you.
Wilma. We get out a lot. And I think, you know, for people, if you can get out, you know, if you can walk, you know, get out however you can.
Yeah.
In the town or wherever.
Yeah.
Find a park, sit on your balcony, whatever. Or if you're lucky like us, get out in the country and walk.
Yeah.
You know, we're lucky enough to walk Wilma and find ourselves in a vast area with nobody. And it's really good for you, you know, it quietens everything down. I think that, and eating well, and don't look at the news.
Yeah.
Social media, cut that down. You know, all those things, self-care as you call it,
Yeah.
will, you know, it will get through to every pore in your body, and you would definitely feel better.
But like you say, it's really important to, I guess, notice that that's going to help you. That stuff's going to 100%, it's going to ease your anxiety. It's going to make you just feel good and vibrant and full of energy and all those things that we long for. But it's not going to necessarily eradicate all problems and suffering that we have. Like you said, you own the fact that you're a catastrophizer. You probably always will be.
Yeah.
And there's actually probably some relief in that, like some liberation. Like, this is just how I am, and I don't have to fix myself or be a better version of me. It's like, this is how I am. It's a good place to get to. Maybe with age, experience, you get to that place.
I think with age, definitely. Yeah. Guide me here, Fearne. I'm losing the thread.
There's nothing to lose. We're just chatting. What was interesting was when we were on one of your many walks the other day with Wilma the dog and Dad, we were talking about the Tuppence Middleton episode that you had listened to very kindly. And she was talking and sharing about her experiences of OCD.
Oh, yeah.
And she has gone through different guises of OCD. It will go from checking to number counting, etc.
Yeah.
And I was sort of explaining to you that if I have bad moments of anxiety, that is something that I lean on almost. I start checking the oven lots of times before I go to bed, or I might walk out of a room and there's like a book is slightly of an angle, and if I don't go back and sort it out, in my head this awful subliminal voice will be like, something bad's going to happen. It could be quite specific actually at times. It's not very nice. And I can't not go back and put that book straight or pick that sock up or whatever it is. I wouldn't say, you know, I've like got OCD or I've never been diagnosed with OCD, but it's certainly something that flares up in times of anxiety. And I didn't know that you've had that as well. And I learned that like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. In fact, I've got it a bit at the moment because, as you know, we're moving, and again, and I'm staring at the oven knobs. Are they all off? Are they all off? I don't want the house to burn down before we move because we won't be able to move, and it goes on and on and on and on. So I get Dad to go in there. I say, can you just go and check it? And once he's done it, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I'm
Put the responsibility on Dad.
That's right.
It can burn down on his clock.
Absolutely. Turning the taps off. Is that tap off? I don't want the house to flood before, you know, our new lady comes and buys the house. Otherwise, she won't buy it, you know. And
so you're looking at the tap and it's not running, but you think my eyes are tricking me. It could still be running.
Yeah,
that's what Tuppence described. It's interesting.
Yeah. In fact, Rick Mail, I remember reading, he had that, and he was with the light switches. Stare at the light switch. Is it off? Can it miraculously switch back on its own, kind of thing?
I have that with specifically locking doors and windows, certainly since I've had kids. I don't think I had any of this stuff before I had kids, but obviously it is the biggest sort of moment where responsibility is so huge out of the blue.
Yeah.
And I, especially if we're staying not in our house, so we're on holiday in a hotel or something, checking window locks and door locks, and I have to keep going back and looking at them. And, you know, it's not really about that, is it? It's not really about if your house floods. It's not really about if someone could climb through a window. It's a feeling of I'm not safe in my life, I think.
Yeah.
General feeling of not feeling safe.
Yeah, you could be right. I never feel safe, ever. Anywhere.
And what is the fear? Because I know mine. My fear, or one of them, outside of having kids and protecting them, but one of my fears on a cognitive level is extreme outside judgment and extreme, which I've had, obviously. But it's the thread of so many things and fears for me that I'm going to be negatively commented on or judged unfairly or whatever.
That's a big one, yeah.
So that is, I know mine, it's quite obvious, but I wonder what your lack of safety is.
I think Dad was very safety conscious.
Your dad, not my dad.
My dad.
Yeah.
I remember being in the back of the car. I think the M1 might have had just opened. I think we were travelling on it, and we hadn't really done motorways very much back in the day. And Dad would say to Karen and I, I'm going to count to 3, and when I get to 3, you're to jump down onto the floor of the well of the... So in case we ever have a crash, all I've got to do is say 1, 2, 3 to you.
Oh, my God.
So, I mean, that was quite...
that's quite
planting a fear into you.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time thinking, this is mad. I'm embarrassed. Stop doing it, you know. And also... see, these things are randomly coming out of my head now. When I met Dad, your dad, and we were in the car, we were going to go out wherever, and my dad came out and he said to Dad, your dad, drive carefully, mate. He said, you've got my whole life in your car.
Wow.
And it's like...
Take that, Mick on.
Wow, you know. And just random things like we used to go on holiday and Dad wouldn't allow us to go out into the water above our knee.
Wow.
He'd put, see, it's all coming out now. He put a barbed wire all around the garden fence so no one could get in.
Yeah, but it's so interesting how this stuff not only plants seeds, but you then carry it on into your life. You know,
you swear you're never going to do it.
Yeah, of course,
and you do.
Of course. But it's in all of our lineage, and for him, there will be something from his parents that he would have got, or from his experience of growing up at the time he grew up, or whatever it might be.
You understand that as you get older. You know, I never did ask my mum about her nervous problems because I was too busy trying to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's so, I just do find it so interesting how so much of it is in our lineage, and you know, I now as a mum feel a slight responsibility, like, oh well, no, not a slight, a massive one. I don't want to put my stuff on my kids, but it's so hard not to, because you're living your life.
Yeah.
You're trying to make yourself feel safe so that they are safe.
Yeah.
It's so hard to go, right, the buck stops here. This is where I'm going to... It's almost impossible. And, you know, there's that old saying, like, you know, your parents are going to fuck you up and you're going to do the same to your kids. And it's kind of inevitable and you just have to go with it. Like, we can't live our lives praying that we're going to be these perfect parents where we don't offload anything, because you will.
It goes way back. And even on like a cellular level, we don't know what we've inherited from,
of course,
in our genes.
Absolutely.
You know, from generations back during the war, the fear they must have felt during the war. That's got to have come through.
100%.
You know, and it could even go back 100 years, 200 years. Who knows?
It's all in there, stored.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, maybe that's quite liberating, because I think often we're so quick to blame ourselves, like, oh, there's something wrong with me, I can't cope with this, it's so pathetic. But you go, wait a minute, this is generations of stuff that I'm carrying, and generations of fear and worry and mental health problems, or whatever it might be. And I think especially around the mental health subject, which is obviously something, you know, it's an en masse conversation now. It's not like it was when you were younger. It's not like it was when your mum was going to a psychiatric day hospital. This is now, luckily, a more commonly held conversation. Probably still not enough. There's still stigmas that are attached to, you know, like even Tuppence was saying with OCD, it's seen as the funny one. It's the joke mental health problem. It's not a joke if you can't leave the house because you're checking light switches, but people make light of it. So there is still a lot of stigma there, but at least we are able to have these conversations more so. But I think we've got to take the blame off ourselves. I'm not blaming our ancestors, but we can at least honour that this is stuff that's travelled through for generations. And it's interesting to look at it and to poke around in it a bit. And, you know, as I said, I wish I'd had more time sort of talking to Nan about it, and maybe Grandad as well, because it seems that he had his stuff going on too that I'm probably less privy to. But I find it very interesting. And then also my newer book, Bigger Than Us, is more, I guess, around spirituality, although I don't use that word so much. I just see it as life and things that we're experiencing in an expansive sort of mindset when you're looking at life. And obviously I was lucky that I benefited from your own interest in that subject matter growing up. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know I was like witnessing anything necessarily spiritual, but at least there was the exposure to that conversation and the language that you might use around things, which I'm very grateful for. And there are many stories in the book that relate back to that. Funnier ones being Dreamcatcher in Pinner, which was our local spiritual shop, where you were always very encouraging, like, go and try past life regression or go and do some Reiki. And I was probably like 16, 17. It wasn't the norm back then to do that, especially in sort of a suburban setting of a high street with a ginormous Tesco opposite. But I felt very lucky that that I sort of, there was an interest growing, like budding from a young age, because you were into it. So how has that helped when looking at your own sort of mental health or how you deal with life? How has spirituality bolstered that and helped you?
Oh, absolutely massively. You know, there is something, somebody, something watching over you, guiding you. You know, I do believe we've all got guardian spirits looking after us. I do believe you've got a hotline to God, you know.
And you're using the word God in a non-religious sense. You mean just sort of greater energy, whatever.
The source of everything.
Yeah.
You know, there's an ear listening to us, experiencing with us, guiding us all the time. And it may not feel like it, but I do believe that is unbreakable, and it's helped enormously. I've been to all these courses, Reiki, and I've done the past life thing with, you know, along with you. I mean, I could go on and on about it, but that's another subject entirely. But the answer to your question, I don't think I could have survived without knowing there was something more.
Yeah. No, I know. I feel it's a bleak prospect to think that it's just us walking around as humans.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't matter if people agree or disagree with that. If it makes you feel good, you go with it and you have your own set of beliefs. As I said, you know, neither of us are aligning to a religion. This is something other than that. And
it's a feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not just flesh and blood. It's a deep feeling. And where does that come from?
Yeah.
You know, it's very mysterious. We don't know.
Yeah, but that's the great bit. And humbling, going, we don't really know anything.
Very
it's
humbling.
A great feeling. And of course, when you're sort of looking into this subject matter, or say you go and do a Reiki course, or you do past life regression, or whatever the hell it is, or you're just interested in this stuff and you start looking into it, I guess one of the foundations of whether it's living a spiritual life, whatever language you want to use here, means that, you know, you don't extract yourself from modern day living. That's a given, that we're all part of this and we buy stuff from shops, and that's just how we now deal with life and we live life. And sometimes it can bring great joy, other times it's a bit of an empty promise. But a lot of the time we notice that it's not always about reaching for the exterior, getting the high from something outside of us. And you do have to do a lot of looking inside, and not just at the good bits and the love and the light, but actually at the ugly bits and the shadow side of who you are, which can be tricky. It's tricky to navigate. It's tricky to view those bits of yourself or accept that they're there. How have you navigated that?
How have I navigated it?
Yeah. Are you okay with looking at your shadow self, and how do you deal with your shadow self?
I hadn't been happy to look at it, and it's always puzzled me why it's there.
Everyone's got
you know,
it.
you do think dark thoughts and what have you, and you just think, why is that there? It would take a lot to unravel it, but in a simple way, I just own it, and I don't question it. You know, you can't, as you say, you can't be all hunky dory all the time. Everything's absolutely wonderful. You know, light and dark. You know, light and shade.
I think it's really important when talking about spirituality to have this conversation, because often I think people might assume, especially when we've got high profile figures who talk about spirituality, you might make the assumption that they live this sort of perfect existence where they have, you know, no negative thoughts, none of their actions are negative, and that's bollocks. Like, everybody out there, I'm sure even Eckhart Tolle has thoughts come in that are, you know, not particularly friendly or nice. It's just who you are. And I think if we're sort of, I hate all these words in this language, but if we're like going on a spiritual journey, or we're starting our spiritual path, we might assume that the end of that path, the elusive end of it, is to be this like peaceful, chilled person who never thinks badly. And that's actually really unhealthy, I think, because you're always going to fall short and then beat yourself up. Actually, it's just about forgiving yourself when those thoughts come in and going, oh, I just mentally called that person a wanker. And then you just go, okay, move on from that, or worse. But we've all got that shadow side. It's there.
Yeah, own it. As simple as that.
Own it.
Own it and move on.
Own it and move on.
Own it, learn and move on.
Yeah.
It's all about learning.
Yeah.
You know, if I've, say, had a big row with Dad or whatever, years ago, I would have had a massive row with him and just sort of, silly old bugger, whatever, you know, just. But now when I do it, I feel really bad. It's like you've got to learn from it. You don't learn unless you feel bad. If you just didn't feel anything, then you would keep doing it. So you've got to learn.
Yeah.
So I've learned, and he would sit here and disagree that I still keep having a go at him. But I am really heartfeltly learning from it and trying to do better next time.
But that's it, isn't it? Like, that is the key to all of it, is just going, oh, I'll try better tomorrow. I think about it every day with parenting. Most nights I go to bed and think, oh, I could have done that so much better. Like, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. Or I wish I'd encouraged Rex to do his homework more, or whatever it is. But you just wake up the next day and go, try again.
Every day's a new day. Wake up and try again.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. You're only
can
human.
Do. So, yeah, we're
You're
all
only human.
So when we're talking about spirituality, as well as the sort of more grounded stuff we're covering, like, it is that simple, wake up, try again, you're just a human, you're going to make mistakes. I know that you also have a deep interest in the more mystic stuff. And you do love the sort of magical bit and the bit that some people will poo-poo. Not me, I love all of it. I'm intrigued by it all, I'm interested in it, whether it's psychic ability, you know, mediumship, whatever it is. I'm open to it all because I don't believe that I know a thing. Tell me some magical experiences you've had.
Wow. Where do I begin?
I don't know, because you've got loads.
I could be laughed off the planet for half of the stuff.
Yeah, but who cares? Who cares about all that?
Okay, Wilfie popped into my head.
Right, you have to tell us who Wilfie is because no one knows.
Wilfie is our beloved retriever who we lost about 5 years ago. And we had him for 12 years. On the day he passed away, it was my birthday actually, which was sort of weirdly an honour.
Yeah,
I don't know
why
I would think that. But we took him to the vet. We had him put to sleep. We came back home and Dad was just...
Dad's very emotional
on
person.
The floor,
yeah.
On the floor. So he said, I've got to get out and have a walk. So I'm just sort of leaning against the wall, looking at him, putting his shoes on. And a voice in my head said, Rainbow Bridge. And it was loud and clear, and it wasn't my thought. It was something that had been dropped into my head. But Rainbow Bridge? No idea. Anyway, I don't know why, but I looked up later on that evening, Rainbow Bridge, on Google, and it was a poem called Rainbow Bridge, When You Lose a Pet, and a beautiful poem. You can look that up anywhere, and how you'll meet them again. You cross the rainbow bridge. I thought, wow, I'd never heard of that poem before. And then a stream of events happened after. We took Wilfie's ashes and put them in the river to a place that I've been going to, and Dad, for the last 55 years. Never seen a swan on the river, ever. Waiting for us were two swans at the end of the river, and they came up to us and they just stared at us. Anyway, I'm cutting this really short. Fast forward a year, we're in Lake Garda, getting ready to go out for dinner, and Dad looks at his watch and he said, oh, look, he said, today's the day we had Wilfie put to sleep at this time, funnily enough. I went, wow. And I walked out onto the balcony, and there were two swans outside the balcony looking up at, literally, there were no
so
other
beautiful.
swans, never seen, the whole week we were there on that moment.
It's so lovely. But I don't think you'd be laughed at for saying that. I think people find great comfort in signs, and there has to be meaning there, because otherwise why are those two freak coincidences happening? It's a beautiful thing to find that meaning in an otherwise frantic, chaotic world.
Well, it's very comforting, and it was wonderful, and it didn't just happen those two times. It happened over and over and over again until we didn't need it anymore. And then it kind of stopped. And now we've got lovely Wilma in our lives. And she's an absolute joy. Added so much. We're loving it.
She's
really
such a
loving
lovely
it.
doggy.
She's a beautiful girl.
She is. She's so special. And tell everyone the story about Wilma quickly, because it's so lovely.
Wilma is from China. She was in a cage outside a butcher's shop. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Kaz, we have a mutual friend who rescues them from China, and she sent me the film of Wilma, and we just thought, oh, I've got to get her out of there. And she went through a big ordeal of going, through different countries, and it cost a lot of money and a long time. But she came last October, and it's as though we've had her forever.
I know, she's so untraumatised by all of that. She's amazing.
She's a wonderful animal, very knowing. You could almost call her a kind little girl. She's so sweet.
She's a kind soul, isn't she?
Yeah.
When she comes in, she's in the kitchen now with Dad, but she walks in, sits down, looks at you with her head tilted. She's so cute.
Yeah, she's great.
We love her.
She's added a lot.
Yeah,
she
I'm
really
so
has
glad.
for both of us. You know.
Yeah, it's lovely. So sweet. Whenever we talk about Wilma, Dad has to still mention Wilf.
Oh, he does it every day.
I know, it's so sweet.
On our walks, I say, oh, look, she's whatever doing. Yeah, well, Wilfie didn't do
No,
that.
I know.
Every time.
Well, Wilf would never do that. He still says it all the time.
It's because he feels he's being unfaithful.
Yeah, he's betrayed Wilf.
Yeah.
Oh, bless
Whereas
Dad.
I think Wilfie sent her to us.
I think so. Absolutely. Well, look, it's really cool to have this chat, isn't it? I'm glad that I sort of learned more about Nan, really, because I think I've been nervous to ask about Nan because I didn't really understand it. At the time, I would have been a small kid or a teenager before Nan died, when I guess I was in my early 20s. And you hear rumblings of things from like you and my auntie Karen, or even when I've talked to my cousin Bieber, but you never quite know the facts or the true story. And of course, this is, your version of events. Karen would have a different version of events. Your mum would have a different version of events. But it's really interesting to learn a bit more about it. I think it's, as awkward as it can be to have that conversation, I think it's really important for families where they can to have that chat and look at the lineage and look at where stuff's come from.
I think my only regret would be that I would sit her down now and talk to her. But at the time, throughout the years, you think, oh, I wish my mum was like other mums. I feel really odd and the odd one out, and I want someone strong that and there for me. And it never really came that we had a chat. But I definitely would now, but it's too late.
Yeah.
And she's obviously in a better place now, and I'll carry on every day, trying to continue breathing and living and enjoying life, and not get too wrapped up in it. But I do think today is brilliant for people chatting about it, bring it out into the open.
Yeah.
That is number one key, and I'm so glad mental health's more of a talking point now, and that, you know, there's plenty of help for people.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there's been such a change in the last sort of decade, and it's only a good thing to talk about this stuff. So,
Well, it was never talked about.
Never.
And there'd be whisperings, and you wouldn't know what was going on. As a kid, you think, what's going on, you know? But no, it's brilliant, you know, and even your pod that you do, I'm sure helps a lot of people.
Well, I hope so. That is the only wish that I have for it. So thank you so much, Mum, for coming on Happy Place.
Well, the pleasure, as I said, is all yours.